Good afternoon. Welcome to Open Classroom. I'm Janet Gillow, the Director of Professional Development for the Brown School, Washington University in St. Louis. Actually, today joining you from Washington University in St. Louis. That's kind of new, as throughout most of our virtual programming, we've been at home. So it's exciting to be back on campus. For folks on the Zoom, you're muted, we can't see or hear you, but the chat feature is enabled, and we'd love for you to keep doing what you've been doing, which is say hello, let us know where you're coming from. For folks on YouTube, we are delighted you joined us, and we don't have a way of moderating that chat. I want to thank and acknowledge Cynthia Williams, my friend and co-host, our Assistant Dean for Community Partnerships. She's here to help moderate the chat. But here at Open Classroom, we are back from a break, ready to resume programming in our normal Tuesday spot, basically until the end of the fall semester. So we have topics just this month ranging from advocacy skills to identifying digital dating abuse, mindfulness practices to prepare for the school year ahead. So much coming your way. If you haven't been on our website, I really do encourage you to check out what's coming up. But as we get started back, it's perfect that we begin our second half of 2021, I guess you'd say, with another presentation from Dr. Megan Keys, who's been one of our favorite mental health experts as we've moved through this pandemic time together. Dr. Keys is a clinical psychologist with expertise in the assessment and treatment of PTSD in adults. She has over 20 years of experience in the trauma field. She's adjunct faculty here at the Brown School. And she's also the founder of Trauma Empowered Consulting, which provides educational services regarding the impact of trauma and stressful life events on clients and employees. So here to talk to us about managing life in the next stage of the pandemic, please welcome back Megan.
Thank you so much, Janet and Cynthia, and thanks for having me again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Open Classroom, and thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to share this content with you on cultivating resilience, and I hope that this is a topic that's going to be resonant for many people. All right, so as always, my goal is to provide information that's going to be helpful and hopeful. So the first portion of today's webinar will focus on potential sources of stress during this transition, as well as the role that resilience plays in helping us adapt to those stressors. I'll then highlight 4 key strategies for cultivating resilience, including practical suggestions for incorporating these skills into your daily life. Please note the various strategies and skills discussed today are not intended to supplement or substitute professional mental health care should such care be warranted. The information is being provided as self-help tools for your own use to build resilience and help enhance emotional well-being. So I'd like to begin with a polling question, just to check in to see how you've been impacted by this stage of the pandemic. For those who would like to participate, please feel free to select whichever option best describes your stress levels during this transition. It typically takes our poll a couple minutes just to register the results. Although there have been many positive developments with the vaccine rollout and society reopening, these changes have resulted in mixed emotions for a lot of people. So my primary goal with this polling question is really just to give everyone the opportunity to learn how others are being impacted. Is one thing we certainly learned over the past year, as this pandemic has impacted almost every person in some way. So we're just going to give this another about 30 seconds or so as the results come in, and then I'll share those with everyone.
Okay, 5 more seconds.
All right. Am I good to go ahead and share it, Janice? Janice?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so hopefully everyone can see that, but essentially what it looks like is kind of the majority of folks, around 51%, are reporting kind of moderate levels of stress during this transition. And mild stress looks like it's coming up as a close second. So thank you for everyone who participated and taking the time to share your experience. One of the things that we know is that a lot of times by learning that you are not alone in your response or reaction to a specific situation or circumstance really helps validate and kind of normalize your experience. And again, just with our other webinars, the goal today is that a lot of the skills that we will be discussing are things that will be able to help kind of reduce some of the stress that folks are experiencing during this time. So let me just shut that down and we'll move on to our next slide. There we go. All right, so regarding potential sources of stress, it's helpful to understand the nature of transitions and how people typically respond. Transitions naturally embody change. Change naturally embodies some degree of uncertainty. Uncertainty typically results in stress. So even when changes are expected and wanted, they often elicit stress and sometimes anxiety for the people going through those transitions. Regarding other sources of stress during this period, for some, concerns about the risk of infection still very much exist. This may include uncertainty about the length of immunity, variants of the virus, as well as concerns for loved ones who have not yet been vaccinated or remain high risk. Returning to in-person events is potentially a significant source of stress for many. The results of a survey conducted by the American Psychological Association this past spring indicated that approximately 50% of the respondents reported uneasiness with returning to in-person interactions. Individuals who had been vaccinated were just as likely to report this uneasiness as those who had not yet received the vaccine. Some individuals may still be dealing with the very real consequences of some specific pandemic-related stressors, such as job loss or financial hardship. Various sources have highlighted the academic struggles that many students experienced this past year, including the decline and disruption of special education services for children with special needs. For many parents and students, these learning challenges and setbacks may absolutely be an ongoing source of worry and concern, especially going into our new academic year. And finally, the one that I think is really important for people to keep in mind is that numerous studies and surveys have evidenced the mental health impact of this pandemic. The results of an ongoing US Census Bureau survey indicated that as of mid-June, approximately 30% of the adults surveyed reported symptoms of anxiety and depression in the past week. When an individual experiences a loss in the context of other significant stressors, it can sometimes be difficult to fully acknowledge and process that loss. Many people may still be experiencing grief reactions associated with the multiple losses that they potentially experienced over the past year. And finally, given the various challenges of the past 18 months, some people may be feeling a sense of exhaustion or of depleted resources, thus making it much more difficult to deal with current stressors in the moment. In order to better navigate this transitional period, it's helpful to understand the impact of the chronic stress that many have experienced over the past year or more. One of the many functions of our brain is to operate as a threat detection system. So just like the antivirus software on a computer, our brain is constantly scanning for any potential signs of danger. When we experience stress, even just thinking about something stressful, our brain interprets that stress as a sign of danger and immediately sends out a signal to our body that we need to be ready to respond to that potential threat. This sets off a series of physiological changes, including increased heart rate, muscle tension, and rapid breathing. This process is called the stress response. When you experience chronic stress, this stress response gets activated much more frequently, and that increased physiological arousal over time can negatively impact your physical and mental health, kind of as noted by the long-term impact of chronic stress on the slide. The effects of chronic stress don't immediately disappear once the stressor ends or the stress starts to decrease. These various changes, anxiety, sleep difficulties, tension, headaches, developed over a period of time and typically require some time to gradually decrease and eventually dissipate. So for those who have been asking, why am I still so stressed? Why am I not handling things better? Your reactions to these current stressors, even if these stressors are mild in comparison to previous ones, are likely being influenced, at least in part, by the chronic stress you've experienced over the past year or more. All right. So within the context of these various potential transitional stressors and that ongoing impact of chronic stress, what role does resilience play? Well, it actually plays a huge role. Whenever we discuss stress, trauma, and adversity, it is so important that we also discuss resilience. Research tells us that the most common response to trauma, adversity, and stress is resilience and recovery. Although most people may experience negative reactions to stressors, these reactions are typically time limited. The vast majority of individuals naturally recover from these stressors and on their own through that role of recovery. So the thing that's to keep in mind is that resilience plays a big role in that recovery. Resilience is defined as the process of adapting well to difficult situations. So this isn't a personality trait that we're born with or without. Resilience is a set of skills that we can learn and strengthen over time by our choices, behavior, and ways of thinking. Cultivating resilience is important because it serves as a protective factor against anxiety and depression, and it improves our coping abilities. So resilience has been found to counter psychological problems by preventing and reducing various mental health symptoms. It also has been found to help facilitate recovery from such conditions if and when they do occur. However, resilience isn't just about reducing or protecting against the negative. It's also about enhancing the positive. Resilience promotes optimal well-being, and it's been associated with mastery and growth. Research evidences many positive aspects of resilience, such as those cited on this slide. For those who have viewed our previous webinars on pandemic-related stress, we've always emphasized resilience and focused on adaptive coping strategies to help minimize the negative mental health impact of the pandemic. So today, our goal is to highlight resilience skills that not only reduce the negative, but also enhance the positive. So my hope is that this shift in focus kind of represents this transition that we're all experiencing. So while there may certainly be ongoing stressors and continuing stressors, hopefully the frequency and intensity of these are decreasing for most people. And we now have the ability to shift some of our efforts from primarily coping and managing to also growing and progressing. So our focus for the remainder of today is really going to be how to build on the resilience that we've all exhibited during this pandemic in order to really optimize our well-being as we move forward. So I just want to pause briefly if there's any questions I can address before we jump into discussing our 4 resilience skills.
So far, we're quiet in the chat. Everybody do feel free to put your questions in at any time during the program, and we will make sure to represent them and at these pauses and check-ins. Seems like we've got everybody with us. Let's keep going.
All right, perfect. So these are the 4 key strategies we're going to be focused on today. The goal is for you to have a range of options. You know, these strategies aren't going to be equally effective or appealing to every person or in every situation, and we want you to have the opportunity to determine what's going to work best for you. So I'll be providing a general overview of each of these strategies, as well as several behavioral suggestions on how to incorporate these skills into your daily life. I'll also review additional resources for each skill so that you may obtain more information and additional practice suggestions if desired. The important thing to remember about resilience skills is that they're like any other skill you wish to develop. Resilience requires regular practice in order to become proficient in them and to fully benefit from them. All right. So our first resilience skill is mindfulness, and this can be defined as the ability to be fully aware of your experience in any given moment, where you are, what you're doing, your thoughts and feelings, without being highly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around you or within you. So often when we experience distressing thoughts or feelings, we immediately jump in to try to change them or fix them in some way. However, criticizing ourselves for having these internal experiences or fighting against that internal upset sometimes results in even more distress. Mindfulness involves accepting your internal state in that moment without judging it or attempting to change it. Mindfulness helps us live more fully in the present by regulating our attention. It allows us to maintain focus on our current experience without being distracted by thoughts of other things, ruminating about negative events in the past, worrying about things that may happen in the future, daydreaming, planning. Research indicates that the average adult brain produces approximately 70,000 thoughts per day. And the vast majority of those are not focused on what's happening right in front of us. So mindfulness really is a way to help us live much more fully in the present moment. Research has evidenced many benefits of mindfulness, as indicated on the slide. In terms of enhancing positivity, mindfulness has been found to increase feelings of happiness, compassion, gratitude, and social connectedness. All right, so although mindfulness is often associated with meditation, it may also be practiced by utilizing brief pauses throughout your day, simply to be more mindful. Mindfulness can be incorporated into almost any task or activity. So this slide highlights some basic strategies for enhancing mindfulness that may be practiced for as short as a few moments or even longer if desired. So first and foremost, when practicing mindfulness, our goal is always to attempt to maintain present focus on whatever experience or activity we're engaged in at that moment. This will likely involve repeatedly redirecting your attention back to that current experience. Moment-to-moment awareness isn't something that tends to come easily to most people, but research indicates that it absolutely can improve with practice. Next, try to practice acceptance. Seek to acknowledge your internal state, whatever it may be in that moment. This can include naming it. I'm stressed right now. I'm worried about teaching in person in the fall. I'm sad I missed my friend's wedding last July. Once acknowledged, just try to be receptive to that experience without judging it or jumping in to try and change it. Another way to enhance mindfulness is to really notice the sensations across all of your senses. So engaging and acknowledging how any given experience is impacting you in each of your sensory domains is a way to really anchor yourself in the present. And this also allows you to more fully experience whatever is occurring in that moment. Utilizing this strategy during positive experiences, when you're feeling happy, grateful, calm, or at ease, can really help optimize those experiences and allow you to get maximum benefit from them. And finally, our fourth strategy is kind of rediscovering the familiar. So during any routine task, your first cup of coffee in the morning, brushing your teeth before bed, take the time to really look at one of the items that you're using or that's around you, your favorite coffee mug, the dog's food bowl, and describe it to yourself. Note the color, shape, texture, any little details that may typically not register. This strategy helps you become more fully aware of your surroundings, which can improve your ability to maintain present focus. So in terms of a structured mindfulness exercise, one of the most common mindful practices is to focus on your breathing, which is the purpose of this particular meditation exercise. So I want to first stress, this is not a breathing exercise. So you are not attempting to change or direct your breathing in any way. Breath awareness meditation involves paying close attention to the physical sensations in your body that accompany each breath cycle. So starting with that very first intake of air at the beginning of the inhale, all the way through the very end of the exhale, and that little transition until the cycle begins again. Whatever your breathing pattern is at that particular moment is perfectly okay. If you're stressed and your breathing is a little more rapid, if you're winding down before bed and your breathing is fairly slow and steady. The goal is simply focused awareness on your internal state, in this case your breath, without trying to change it. So as a formal meditation exercise, try to practice breath awareness for about 5 to 10 minutes once or twice a day. And as you become more proficient in it, try to gradually increase that duration up to 20 minutes. However, breath awareness is also a technique that you can certainly utilize during those brief kind of pauses or mindful moments throughout your day as a way to practice mindfulness. And just kind of a gentle reminder for this exercise and any other exercises presented today, if for any reason you do experience any pain or discomfort during these exercises, you are always free to discontinue. And if that discomfort continues for any reason, please consider consulting a healthcare provider. All right, so our second skill for building resilience is self-compassion. So self-compassion is defined as extending to yourself the same level of empathy and understanding you would offer a friend who is struggling or suffering. One of the key benefits of self-compassion is that it reduces self-criticism. Now, there are many reasons that reducing self-criticism is helpful, but this is particularly important with regards to chronic stress. Research has shown that self-critical thoughts can be experienced as almost an emotional attack on ourselves and activate that stress response, which results in physiological arousal and the release of the stress hormone cortisol. So self-criticism does end up kind of linked to that threat detection system in our brain. Compassion, including self-compassion, is linked to a different system, the mammalian care system. So practicing self-compassion has been found to trigger this care system, which counteracts the physiological arousal of the stress response. When activated, the care system releases the hormone oxytocin, which reduces cortisol levels and results in feelings of calm and safety. So in terms of enhancing positivity, in addition to this physiological benefit, self-compassion has been associated with increased happiness, motivation, and self-confidence. All right, so self-compassion includes 3 key components. When extending compassion to yourself, when in a difficult situation or struggling, these are the 3 steps that you're going to want to try to implement. The first is being mindful of your current experience. So mindfulness centers on being receptive and non-judgmental about our experiences. Try to acknowledge and accept whatever distressing emotions or thoughts you may be experiencing in that moment. The second component of self-compassion is common humanity. So this is really the recognition that we all struggle and suffer at times. Being able to remind yourself of this often helps people feel less isolated and kind of places their struggle into perspective. Distress is a universal experience that we all share. And then finally, our third step involves providing yourself support and kindness. So this includes intentionally trying to soothe and calm yourself, as well as trying to validate whatever feelings or experience you may have in that moment. So some common barriers to practicing self-compassion include concerns that it's self-indulgent, that it could make you weak or vulnerable, and that it sometimes ends up being a way of making excuses for bad behavior or poor performance. However, research has shown that self-compassionate people are more likely to engage in healthful behaviors, including regular exercise and less alcohol use. They evidence better coping abilities during difficult situations, including trauma, and self-compassionate people tend to take greater personal responsibility for their choices and actions. All right, so again, in terms of just providing a kind of structured exercise for practicing self-compassion, a self-compassion break is essentially just a targeted opportunity to practice this skill. So this particular exercise involves thinking about an experience that resulted in some level of distress for you, and really trying to let yourself get in touch with whatever feelings were associated with that experience. Then you'll attempt to implement those 3 steps of self-compassion by utilizing a simple statement that acknowledges each one of those components: mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. What we find is that the process of acknowledging your distress or a stressful experience, recognizing that you are not alone and that everyone struggles, and providing yourself empathy and kindness often reduces the intensity of that distress. Now, I provided some sample statements for this exercise, but you are welcome to create your own and tailor these statements to specific challenges or specific internal states that you would like to be able to practice self-compassion on. And this technique of really being able to kind of gauge each one of those components of self-compassion by using just a single sentence or simple statement, this is a technique that can be used anytime that you encounter a difficult situation or feeling distressed and struggling and want to be able to practice self-compassion in that moment. So our third resilience skill is gratitude. And this can be defined as a sense of appreciation, genuine appreciation, for the good things in your life, as well as the sources of that goodness. So research indicates that we tend to focus on negative events or negative aspects of events more than we do on the positive ones. So the ability to shift our focus to the positive aspects of our life really helps counter this natural tendency to kind of dwell on the negative. Intentionally recognizing, appreciating, and giving thanks for good things improves our well-being. In terms of enhancing positivity, research indicates that gratitude has been associated with increased happiness, optimism, compassion, and better physical health. All right, so once again, just several strategies for enhancing gratitude over the course of your day. One of the most common practices is keeping a gratitude journal, and we're going to review that in more detail on the next slide. Resilient individuals often use grateful remembering during difficult times or stressful times. Reminiscing about something or someone that you're grateful for can enhance positive feelings in the moment. Frequent expressions of gratitude, saying thank you to others, noting what you're appreciative of, sharing grateful experience with family and friends, and using language that really reflects appreciation. I'm so fortunate that, I'm so thankful for, are all ways to enhance gratitude on a regular basis. One of the key barriers to practicing gratitude is simply forgetfulness. Gratitude just kind of falls off the radar. So visual reminders can be very helpful. So this could include photos of people, pets, opportunities that you're grateful for, mementos from grateful experiences, or quotes about gratitude and thanks. And our final strategy is a daily gratitude break. And this is also sometimes referred to in the literature as a count your blessings exercise. So this simply involves intentionally expressing gratitude on a regular basis. So you may prefer to designate a specific time, such as setting aside a few minutes before you go to bed at night, or you may prefer to incorporate these breaks into other daily routines. While you're waiting for your computer, logging onto your computer every morning, when you're walking to your car after work. Gratitude breaks can also be spontaneous, such as if you end up stuck in traffic or if you're placed on hold while on the phone. The key behind this strategy really is making that acknowledgement and expression of gratitude a regular part of your routine. All right, and for a specific kind of structured gratitude exercise, as noted, gratitude journals are one of the most common kind of exercises for enhancing gratitude. This may be a daily practice as described. Really, it's just important that you find a frequency that's going to work for you and kind of most enhance the chances of you being able to get in the regular practice. The goal truly is just to regularly identify and write about those things for which you experience a sense of appreciation and thankfulness. Now, simply listing the things that you're grateful for is sufficient, and it definitely can help increase grateful thinking as well as result in those benefits of gratitude that we already talked about. However, expanding on that just a bit by including how each one of those items impacted you, how it made you feel, what it meant to you, is a way to really engage and experience the positive feelings associated with that item. And this is a way just to really help optimize your experience of gratitude in that moment. All right. And our final strategy for cultivating resilience is optimism, which is defined as a hopeful attitude and belief in positive outcomes. In terms of enhancing positivity, optimism is really all about improving our ability to be able to think and feel more positively. So optimists expect good things to happen, whereas pessimists tend to anticipate unfavorable outcomes. As noted on the slide, studies have evidenced many both physical and mental benefits of optimism. But I want to expand on this definition by highlighting the importance of realistic optimism, especially within the context of navigating changes during a transition. Realistic optimism acknowledges the role of personal effort. So you hope for a positive outcome, but you also actively work towards achieving that goal with the belief that if you do your best, things will most likely work out as well as possible. Unrealistic optimism is just a blind faith in a favorable outcome without considering potential obstacles or the necessary effort required to achieve that goal. Realistic optimists typically consider the positive and negative outcomes of any given endeavor. They plan accordingly, including how to overcome potential challenges, and they persist in their efforts even when setbacks occur. So a central component of practicing optimism is going to be your thinking. Not just your expectations, but how you interpret the different events and experiences in your life. Therefore, I just want to take a moment to kind of step away from our discussion of optimism and focus on our thoughts. Healthy thinking is an adaptive coping strategy that plays a key role in building resilience, especially during stressful times. So our thoughts or perceptions of any given situation have a huge impact on our feelings. Given the multiple challenges that most everyone has experienced over the past year and a half, it's completely understandable that you likely had many experiences of anxiety, sadness, and anger. These are natural emotional responses to sometimes very difficult situations. However, the intensity of our feelings can be exacerbated by our thoughts. If you notice at times certain emotions feel very powerful, overwhelming, maybe even disruptive, that's a definite indication to check in on your thinking. When our thoughts gravitate towards extremes or absolutes, using words like always, never, should, that tends to be unhelpful, as extreme thoughts typically result in extreme emotions. Replacing those unhelpful thoughts with thinking that is just a bit more balanced and accurate not only can reduce the intensity of those negative emotions, but also allow for the possibility of positive ones. So, given the various challenges everyone has experienced and still may be experiencing to some degree right now, many people may find themselves kind of struggling with issues related to expectations and control. So, for example, a common unhelpful thought that many may have experienced is, I should be coping better, which understandably could result in feelings of inadequacy, anxiety, maybe even helplessness. Replacing that thought with one that's just a bit more balanced, most people are struggling and I'm doing the best I can, may not only reduce the intensity of those feelings of anxiety and helplessness, but also allow for the possibility of some positive feelings, such as feeling a bit more capable or a bit more hopeful. Finding ways to maintain hope during difficult times and transitional times is important. Keeping a hopeful or optimistic perspective can be very reassuring because it sustains the expectation that things will eventually improve and get better. So when we actually start to think about practicing optimism, the important thing to remember is that the primary difference between an optimistic versus a pessimistic attitude really centers on how a person understands or explains the negative events in their life. The three components of an optimistic explanatory style are listed here, with the kind of opposing pessimistic attributions in parentheses. So these guidelines can be used for practicing optimistic or positive thinking. First, optimists tend to consider external factors that may have contributed to the negative outcome. They have the ability to step back, broaden their perspective, and evaluate a range of variables that may have contributed to that undesired result. Pessimists typically primarily blame themselves for the negative outcome, attribute it to their own personal faults or personal shortcomings. Now, optimists may evaluate their performance and choices in terms of how to improve for next time, but optimists don't tend to engage in self-blame or self-condemnation. Second, optimists view these unfavorable outcomes as isolated events that don't impact their abilities in other areas of their life or decrease their chances of success in the future. Pessimists tend to view setbacks as pervasive. This one incident is just part of a consistent pattern of negative outcomes and failures in their life. And third and finally, optimists tend to perceive setbacks as temporary, an undesired result, but something that is short-lived and modifiable. Pessimists tend to view negative outcomes as permanent and unchanging, just further evidence that things don't tend to work out in their favor. Research indicates that optimists are able to better bounce back from setbacks. If one approach didn't work, they have the flexibility and stamina to consider and pursue other options. All right, and now again, just some additional strategies for enhancing optimism throughout your day. First, research indicates that mindfulness and gratitude both enhance optimism. So if you choose to practice either of those resilience skills, just be aware of that added benefit. The remaining strategies really focus on just simply increasing your exposure to positivity or positive thinking. So again, this may include just incorporating quotes or images associated with hope and positivity into your daily surroundings. taped to the bathroom mirror, attached to the computer monitor as the screensaver on electronic devices. Reading books and articles about resilience or resilient people is another way to really help increase your exposure to positive thinking. If you spend a good amount of time on social media or watching television and movies, really take the time to consider the content of what you're viewing. If it embodies negative themes or elicits negative reactions from you, it's bringing you down, it makes you feel bad about yourself, you end up feeling sort of frustrated or irritated after viewing it. Really consider reducing your exposure and finding more positive alternatives. And finally, similar to gratitude, visual reminders, photo mementos that inspire hope or positivity are another simple way to enhance optimism across your day. All right, so now that we've reviewed our 4 key strategies for building resilience, I'd like to return to our original definition. So part of adapting well to difficult situations is recognizing when professional assistance may be needed. So I'd like to just take a few moments to touch on seeking mental health care. First, here are just some potential indicators to keep in mind if you're trying to determine whether or not meeting with a mental health provider may be necessary. So regarding whatever changes or symptoms you may be experiencing, if these symptoms become excessive, occurring more often than not for an extended period of time, typically longer than 2 months, distressing, these changes are starting to feel unmanageable, out of control, becoming a source of conflict in your relationship. If the changes impair your functioning, so now these symptoms are preventing you or interfering with you doing what you need to do or want to do. And finally, if any of these changes embody safety concerns, thoughts of hurting yourself or others, frequent thoughts of death, maybe even vague, better off dead feelings. These are all indications that seeking professional assistance may be warranted, at least for an evaluation to try to get a better idea of what's going on and to consider potential treatment options. With regards to treatment, especially if you're considering psychotherapy, please be aware that there are many evidence-based, time-limited treatments for issues such as anxiety, depression, and insomnia. When searching for a therapist, this resource from Psychology Today is very user-friendly. It allows you to search a range of mental health clinicians, including psychiatrists, for medication based on the type of provider you're seeking in your location. And finally, I always want to ensure people have access to a crisis line if needed. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a 24/7 confidential resource for individuals in crisis or with a loved one in crisis. Their website provides a wide range of resources as well. I'd encourage you to consider adding that phone number and web address to the contact list in your phone, just to ensure you have it at your fingertips should you ever need it for yourself or someone else. All right, and finally, I'm just going to quickly walk us through resources so you kind of just have an idea of what's here and what may be of interest to you. This is one of the primary resources that I use for today's content, the Resilience Workbook by Dr. Glenn Schiraldi. It highlights numerous skills for building resilience, including the 4 skills we cover today, and includes practical suggestions and exercises for practicing those skills. And there is the Amazon link just to keep things simple. All right, regarding mindfulness, Headspace and Calm are both mobile apps primarily focused on mindfulness meditation. This past January, Headspace released a Netflix series called The Headspace Guide to Meditation. It's composed of 8 20-minute episodes that include education as well as a 10-minute guided meditation exercise. So it is a great introduction to meditation for folks who are interested in that. The Mindfulness Coach is a mobile app developed by the National Center for PTSD. It is free and available to the public. And finally, the Center for Mindfulness at UC San Diego, their website has many resources for both mindfulness and compassion, including free guided meditations. And one additional resource that I wanted to mention that I forgot to put on the slide is the website mindful.org. So if anybody is familiar with Mindfulness magazine, this is the same group, and their website just has a wide range of resources available to the public. All right, regarding self-compassion, so Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Chris Germer are two of the leading experts in kind of the world of research in self-compassion, and their websites include many additional exercises and guided practices. The Center for Mindful Self-Compassion was founded by both of them, and it offers formal trainings and workshops in self-compassion. And that last link is just an article that was authored by both of these individuals, and it just provides a really excellent overview of self-compassion for folks who would like to learn a bit more about that. Regarding gratitude, so the mobile app Calm that we just mentioned does have a number of free resources on its website, including some that are kind of designated for gratitude. The greater good, this particular link just provides really kind of detailed instructions and prompts for keeping a gratitude journal for folks who might like something a little more structured. And then finally, that last link is just an article by Dr. Robert Emmons, again, a leading expert in the field of gratitude, and it's a great summary on the benefits of this skill. All right, and then finally with our optimism resources, so the first is just a quick and easy read by Mayo Clinic on positive thinking, and it does include practical suggestions on how to help kind of change thinking and think more positively. The second link, again, is just a structured practice exercise for folks who really want a more formal exercise in optimism. And then finally, if we have any administrators or management on today, that article from the Harvard Business Review is just an excellent article on leading with optimism. All right, so that concludes our content for today. We're still doing okay on time. Before transitioning to questions, I'd like to end with another poll. So I'm a big advocate of a call to action. So based on the 4 skills that we discussed today, if you had to choose one of these resilience skills to start practicing this week, maybe even this evening, which one you think would be most helpful for you right now? And while we're waiting on those results, I just want to say a quick word about references. So my goal was really to utilize sources that were easily accessible and user-friendly. So everything cited on those 3 reference lines is available in the public domain. My hope was that if you weren't familiar with some of these sources, this is an opportunity to introduce you to some helpful websites that have a good deal of mental health and emotional wellness materials that are available to the public. Just got a few more minutes on our poll. All right, and I'm going to excellent. All right. So it looks like self-compassion is in the lead in terms of what folks feel might be most helpful to them at the moment. So I strongly encourage checking out that article by Drs. Neff and Germer, as well as their websites, because they just have excellent resources with mindfulness, compassion. This is great. I'm so glad that folks feel like of the 4 skills we covered, there really was something there for everyone. Thank you so much for responding. It always helps to see kind of what's most resonant for people. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut that down and we can open it up to questions and discussion.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for a wonderful presentation this afternoon. And the question that I have is, because many, if not all of us, have been thrust into challenging work environments due to the pandemic and coming out, how might organizations help individuals returning to in-person work? How might organizations help their workers flourish and feel confident and at their best while at work? Because sometimes it's not a matter of needing to build resilience or coping. We've done that. Now coming back into the organization, what do you think organizations can do for employees?
To organizations, I think first and foremost, part of it really is, again, helping kind of educate people and understand the very types of challenges or struggles they may have returning to that work environment, just so that people can have the knowledge to realize that, gee, if they are experiencing some level of anxiety or nervousness or avoidance about wanting to take on certain tasks or attend certain meetings, that they aren't alone. And that is kind of part of this adjustment process. I think another thing that could be helpful with organizations, to whatever degree it's possible for organizations to do this, is to try to get input from employees and workers. If you have the ability to conduct surveys or have an anonymous Dropbox, find out what folks are struggling with and what kind of can be done to potentially help address some of those issues. Because then that way, at least the workers feel like they're being heard and have the opportunity to really express what some of the specific struggles or challenges are. And management or leadership then isn't kind of spinning their wheels, but really focusing their time and efforts on the key issues for those employees. I do think, and again, this is probably just my level of personal belief and advocacy, I do think that within professional work environments, it still is really important for people to educate and normalize kind of mental health effects of pandemic, the transitional phase, returning to work. It's going to be so important for people to understand what's happening and also understand what they can do about it at a personal level in terms of self-help skills or things that organizations can do about it as well. One resource that may be helpful is it's through the American Psychiatric Association, and it's called the Center for Workplace Health. And it really does look at kind of the mental health impact of various stressors and issues within a workplace. It often offers suggestions on how to navigate those. And that may be something that could be useful to administrators as well as just an additional resource.
Megan, thank you so much. There are wonderful comments and compliments coming in the chat, things that really resonated for folks. Edmundo suggested to the group that one way to supplement a gratitude practice is to document your gratitude through photographs. I thought that was
great.
But Ying is particularly interested in resiliency as it relates to healthy aging. And I just wanted to open up any comments that you had specifically related to older adults and this content on resiliency.
So I may just pause for one moment and think, because I don't know that I'm going to be able to direct people to specific kind of resources or researchers right off the top of my head on that one. I do think one thing that's important to keep in mind, and this just tends to go with mental health among older adults in general, is, well, first of all, we absolutely do see resiliency. And you do see this like in some of the literature on grief and loss among older adults, about how resilience really plays a role, especially by that stage in life where people have experienced multiple losses and have experienced multiple periods of grief. But I think the other thing that's really important to think about in terms of mental health with older adults is a lot of times there is this common misconception that depression, anxiety, that's just a normal part of aging. And that's just sort of to be expected. And the truth is it really isn't. It can be more common during that phase in life because of different stressors or challenges that they may be experiencing, but it's by no means just considered a regular part of the aging process. So that if you do tend to work with older adults or, loved ones who are older, if you do tend to notice potential symptoms or signs of that, just be aware that there are evidence-based treatments for older adults to help address those type of symptoms.
Megan, near last question for me. As you presented, resilience is only one component of well-being. And then you broke out the other coping mechanisms. Could you talk a little bit more about the other mechanisms for coping with situations that you have no control over?
Certainly. So, one of the things when we think about adaptive coping, which is a central part of building resilience, is some of those strategies that we've kind of even touched on in the past. So when individuals are in the midst of a stressful or traumatic event, there are certain things, just I always consider them sort of almost like the core resilience skills, the things that can really help people manage and adapt to these circumstances that they don't have control over. And those would include probably some of the classics that we've talked about, that promoting healthy thinking, really trying to be able to kind of manage your thoughts and the degree to which they're influencing your feelings, that can be really important. Basic self-care, when people are under the stress of circumstances that they don't have control over or can't control, that can be a huge stressor for a person. So maintaining basic self-care, physical self-care in terms of regular, balanced diet, regular exercise, adequate sleep, and mental self-care in terms of, to whatever degree you can, practicing gratitude, engaging in things that you enjoy, maintaining social contact, those can be important as well. And I think, one of the biggest things that always comes kind of screaming through when we talk about resilience or enhancing mental health or dealing with stressors and these kind of larger than life forces that we don't have direct control over is the social connection. Just how important it is to be able to stay connected to people, to be able to speak to what you may be experiencing if you're comfortable disclosing that with the person. As we've always said, people need to be able to talk about what's happening to them, especially when they're going through negative or stressful experiences. So social connection and so enhancing social connection is something that really can pretty much benefit folks across the board.
That was helpful. And I heard the answer in some of what you just said. When you're dealing with adolescents and youth who are experiencing many of the things that we've described, but they are too young to cultivate resilience and coping, how might a parent or a youth leader assist a youth in the area of resilience and coping?
So one thing that might be really useful is, so let me just start by saying I do primarily work with adults. So what I'm going to share with regarding to youth is just kind of general knowledge based on my area of specialty with trauma and stressful life events. But what I want to do is kind of direct you to a resource that I think might be particularly helpful for this. So the first one is called the Child Traumatic Stress Network. So this is a website that has a lot of resources geared towards children that are experiencing adversity or stressful life events or trauma. So that can definitely offer some resources, including practical suggestions on how to support youth and adolescents. Another one that might be really even more specific to resilience is in the references today, a few different times I cited a resource called The Greater Good. So the Greater Good Science Center is affiliated with UC Berkeley, and they have kind of different divisions. One of them is called The Greater Good in Education, and you'll be able to see it on the tabs on our website. That is a resource also that can provide a lot of kind of information about enhancing resilience and well-being, because that's really what the Greater Good, this particular organization center, is about, is that focus on resilience and enhancing emotional well-being. So that is a segment of that organization that does focus more on youth and within schools. And that may be another area where you can find some much more kind of tailored resources for youth, particularly under the umbrella of resilience.
Thank you, Megan.
Sure.
Well, Megan, we have gone through an hour, made it go by very quickly indeed. There's lots of thanks and gratitude to you in the chat, people practicing that resiliency strategy that we're grateful for you. With the minute or so that we have left, are there any final thoughts that you want to offer to the group?
I think the main thing that I want to highlight is, and we talked about this a bit on the last webinar too, is that, well, first and always, it's just wonderful seeing people still having an interest in these topics and still willing to invest an hour with us. So thank you for that. And we always hope that what we're sharing at least landed somewhere that's going to be useful for you. I think the biggest thing that we need to remember going through the summer, going into the fall, and kind of through the remainder of this year is this is still very much a period of transition, and people are going to be responding to that very differently depending upon what types of difficulties or stressors people may be experiencing, they may still really need to be more in that mode of coping and managing and minimizing negative impact. Other folks where things may be shifting a little more and have a little more breathing space, really thinking about how to enhance the positive, especially after this long haul of the pandemic, can be really useful. I think the thing that's important to remember, and research shows us this in different areas, is that for many people, after going through stressful life events and adversity, yes, they certainly can adapt well during the adversity and pull on personal strengths, but we also see that sometimes after the adversity, people are able to find benefits. They're able to discover different types of personal strength or strategies or coping abilities that they developed during that they now have in their arsenal as something to use going forward. And so I think that's something also that I would encourage folks to really think about. We need to acknowledge what everybody has been through over this past year. It was tremendous. And even in the context of all the stress and change, I suspect that for most people, they think about it, they're also to be able to identify some good that came out of it. And those are the important things to really be able to hold on to and build on going forward.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for spending yet another hour with us. This has been wonderful. Appreciate the audience, so very generous with us. And Cynthia, thank you so much for helping to make this happen. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of your day. And please do join us again soon for another open classroom. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everybody. Goodbye now.
Thanks so much.